Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today's episode number 38. I'm your host, Roman Zelchenko. I'm a former immigration lawyer turned immigration entrepreneur. I'm the founder of Laborless, which is an immigration tech startup that automates H-1B compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which brings you this show. Today is a really interesting episode. Usually I'm interviewing tech founders or like executives at companies or partners at big law firms. Mostly they are the sort of CEOs of the organization or founders or co-founders of the organizations that they're at. Today's a different one because we're interviewing basically an intrapreneur. So a person who is within a really large corporation, but is actually kind of running almost a startup inside of it that we will talk all about. So my guest today is Damian Wilson, who is he's basically leading a company called, or a website called Abogado.com, which lives within Thomson Reuters, the kind of multinational corporation. And Abogado.com, as we'll talk about, basically was part of the organization, and sort of Damian took the reins along with his team, and they've built it up and continuing to build it as a platform that helps lawyers, so including immigration lawyers who target or who work with Spanish-speaking clients. It's super interesting. It's all about kind of web marketing and digital marketing from that perspective. But without further ado, I'm not going to give the whole spiel because I don't know the whole spiel. So Damian, thank you so much for being here and for joining. And I appreciate your time and super excited to hear about everything you're working on.
Hey, Roman, thank you for the warm introduction. Certainly, there's many more people behind the scenes than I am at Abogado.com, and just excited to have an opportunity to chat about it.
Yeah, totally. It's always like it's the team and the people who support us are, the ones that make everything happen. Before we jump in, for folks listening or watching here live, please shout yourself out. Tell us where you're calling from. I love just shouting people out sort of here if you leave a comment. So tell us where you are and where you're kind of listening in from, especially if you're around the world. That's always super cool. And also if you use Abogado.com, because I've talked to a bunch of people who have, I don't know, let us know. I mean, it's a live show, so it's fun. And it would be cool to kind of see who's in here, who knows Damian and Damian's team. I think that's always kind of super fun. So, but without further ado, I suppose, the thing that Damian, you and I were chatting about was how important, at least I think it is, to learn about the person behind an organization. People could look at your website, they can look at marketing materials, they can look at sales materials. And there's always kind of, you can jump to what you're passionate about, why you do what you do. But like we were chatting a little bit before we kind of went live about some of what you did sort of professionally before you started at Thomson Reuters. And whereas maybe typically in an interview, we don't think about like, well, what did you do during college as a job? But it's these experiences form who we are and how we do business and sort of how we look at our profession. So I'm excited to kind of, share your story with everyone and kind of learn about what makes you tick. You're based in Minnesota, right?
Yes, Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I was born in St. Paul, crossed the river, really branched out, and went to school down the street.
That's amazing. I was going to go to an AILA conference in, I think it was in Minneapolis, that was supposed to take place last May. And then, of course, with COVID, everything completely shut down, travel shut down. And then obviously with, the murder of George Floyd, like that was happening right on your, so I think at first AILA was like, we're not sure, but then they're like, you know what, we're going to sort of cancel, and they made everything digital. But I was really excited to go because I've never actually I've been to the Pacific Northwest, but I've never been to sort of a few of those somewhat Eastern states. Right. And just, it's so beautiful, and I'm kind of bummed I didn't get to go, but hopefully over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And I think too, another event that would have been really cool in Minneapolis was the Hispanic National Bar Association was also going to have kind of a conference here, and ended up having to do a virtual version, which, is fantastic. But when you have that opportunity to meet people face to face, I'm looking forward to a time when we can get back to that type of setup as well.
Yeah, totally. I miss being in person, but so you grew up in St. Paul. what was it kind of, I'm in New York City and I've met a lot of people from warmer states and they're like, I don't know how you deal, but I don't know how you deal. So how did you deal? What was it like? I mean, how long this is naive of me because I've never been, but how long are sort of the summers and the winters?
I mean, we have a beautiful 3 months every year. No, but it's honestly not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. We like to joke and kind of play into it, and
right.
On team calls across the country, I'm consistently bringing up the weather, and I think that's just a Minnesota tendency to like to weather shame other parts of the country and brag about our low temperatures. But for the most part, we have some pretty great summers. Everybody here is all about lakes and getting out on them. So we are constantly on the water as much as we can when the weather allows us to.
Is that kind of what you did when you were younger? I mean, you, like family, friends, et cetera, spend time on lakes or outside, things like that?
Yeah. I mean, so Minneapolis is one of the most active cities in the country in terms of outdoor activities during the summer. And so it's kind of one of those things that you don't really inherently think about when you think of Minneapolis as people being outdoorsy, but it is certainly the case. And people are always on bikes, kayaks, whatever, any boats, whatever they can do to get outdoors and enjoy. Certainly, growing up, it was just playing with friends, getting out on. At the time, we were getting out on a friend's boat on the Mississippi and riding around. But now it's a different part of town. We tend to go out to Lake Minnetonka, which is a fairly known place in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the only places I do know. I always like to brag that I'm very geographically knowledgeable about the US, but that's basically that. So, and I'm curious, I like to ask a little bit of this question to a lot of the guests, like, when you're in high school or perhaps earlier, were you kind of like one of those entrepreneurial kids, like the lemonade stand, like selling baseball cards? Like, did you see yourself as that kind of kid, or were you kind of studious and just, I'm going to, learn sciences and things or something in between? I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, I grew up in always doing some little side hustle, if you will. So yes, is the short answer to your question. We have the largest state fair, or the second largest state fair, something like that, in the country. And so every year, a mass amount of people descend on the Twin Cities and go to that state fair. And growing up, I would consistently be parking cars on friends' yards, just taking $5, $10 fee here or there, and just literally guiding a car in. I was not probably more than 10, 11, 12 years old, just lining up the lines at the start of the day and bringing cars onto the front yard. And my first couple seasons, I did that. And then I did a pop stand as well. And then not shortly thereafter, I was negotiating with other neighbors who had front yards and saying, hey, I'll split the profits with you if you let me take your yard and fill it up with cars all day long.
Wow.
Too. So always had that entrepreneurial itch, if you will. And it's continued. I mean, I found ways throughout my, in college, as a young professional, as a growing up professional now with two boys, a wife, now it's Abogado and Thomson Reuters and finding new ways to entertain clients and figure out how I can be helpful to them, right? And that's ultimately what entrepreneurship is, in my mind, is finding how you can be helpful to another person and delivering that value once you've uncovered it.
I love that you were not just like side hustling, but you were like scaling your business when you were a kid. You're like, all right, well, we got more demand. I'm out of room on this yard, so let me go like negotiate. I mean, you're kind of learning negotiation skills young. That's really fascinating. I don't know if I've ever heard of anybody doing that at such a young age.
I mean, I don't think that I was anything special by any means, but it was fun just to go through a season sitting literally start of the day to the end of the day at a corner intersection and having a sign selling soda and water, and realizing that there's only so many people who are going to pass by. I can't make any more money unless more people pass by, and then figuring out, oh, then we have to do X, Y, Z, and the other to increase and grow and scale. And that problem solving element is always a fun piece to the entrepreneurship pie, if you will.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, not to talk for too long about what your childhood entrepreneurial endeavors were, but I'm curious, because I didn't do, like, I asked this question in part because I didn't do this. I feel like there was always like business discussion around me when I was a kid, but I never went out to do, maybe because I'm in New York City, and so I'm not going to set up a lemonade stand just right outside of my building or something like that. Although theoretically there's way more foot traffic, I could have made more money, but I just never did that. And so I'm curious, like, do you remember at all, when you earned that first couple bucks, or like, you're a kid and you're earning your own money. This isn't money you're getting from your parents for doing chores. You're going out and doing it yourself. Was it like, did your parents kind of encourage that? Or I don't know, was there any sort of kind of foundation of like, yeah, way to go? Or did they help you if you had questions?
Yeah. So my parents were very encouraging in the sense of letting me flourish in environments that were conducive to what I was good at or what I wanted to do. And so I always felt that they, were open to questions if I ever had a question, but would always kind of have that go get it attitude. Like, work ethic was kind of number one. It was like a baseline expectation. We're going to do whatever it is we're going to do, and we're going to do it well, and we're going to do it at as hard as we can, right? Reasonably. And so that was kind of the baseline expectation. But then in terms of just support and guidance, they would always let me trip and fall and find where I was weak and find where I was strong, and then and kind of self-select into the things that I was passionate about. And so for me with the entrepreneurship, I probably made a couple of less than ideal decisions throughout that time frame growing up, and they let me make those decisions and learn from them. And so without being able to stumble a little bit, I think it's also hard to learn, right? If you're in that padded environment, it becomes a challenge to find the path that ultimately leads to your success.
I love that. I totally agree. And I'll be curious kind of maybe later on in our discussion to hear about what you think about that now that you're sort of within a large organization where probably there are more guardrails, and of course, it's more corporate, but what opportunities there are to sort of experiment and try new things and perhaps fail maybe in a little bit of a more controlled environment or fashion, but still fail nonetheless. But okay, so you went to University of St. Thomas, and you went to undergrad there. You went to get your MBA later, right? But you got your degree in international business, which sounds like it makes sense, right? I mean, you're right. So we talked a little bit about some of the work that you're doing during college. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's super interesting, and I think it just shows that kind of string and the continuation of your professional sort of growth as an entrepreneur. So I don't know, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I was one to kind of consistently wear multiple hats. So I was a lifeguard for a good portion of high school as well as college, and was doing that bright and early in the morning, probably too early in the morning, given how late I was up at night in college, just being a college student and having fun. And then would go to class during the day. And then I ran a franchise business my sophomore through senior year of College Pro, which is a painting and window cleaning company. Very student focused. So their whole business is set up around students, kind of like college nannies and tutors, if you will. Very similar setup, just with exterior residential. So doing painting and window cleaning for single family homes, and going out, knocking on doors, making phone calls, sending emails, finding the homeowners, and lining up the work, hiring college students to my first season. I was the one squeegeeing windows, And my second season, I had figured out a way that I didn't have to squeegee all the windows. I was still doing that. And then by the third year, I had a team of individuals running their own franchises and employing other college students. And so it's one of those things where kind of going back to the parking cars as a kid. I mean, it just, you start to see what works, what doesn't work, and you just iterate. And that's what I did throughout college. And the bandwidth, I look back on it now and I think maybe my life now is more simple than it was then.
Yeah. Having one job where you have your set hours sounds nice sometimes. Right? That's awesome. And so I'm a little curious. You effectively by your senior year, you hired other college students who themselves hired other college students to squeegee and clean windows and things like that. Was it set up in a business structure where like you took some cut of what everyone was doing? And if so, like, how did you set that up? I mean, did you have templates from the company? I mean, how do you figure all that out as a college kid?
Yeah, so that was kind of the beauty at the time, was it was a franchise business, right? So it was kind of here's a business in a box, and you get to, we have we set up the insurance, we set up all of the difficult things that would normally be not possible for a limited hour of the day college student to go out and find. Not that there aren't many college students who can do that and have done that and started amazing businesses. But for somebody who needed, some of the boxes checked before they started their entrepreneurial journey, it was a great fit, and it worked well for me, just in developing my sales skills, my organizational skills. At the time, I probably had zero. Leadership skills, going from not having any employees to having employees and having to figure out the dynamics therein. I mean, there's a lot to be learned. So it's kind of like a mini MBA all at once. And so that, for me was a very formative time in my business development.
That's super cool. Yeah, listening to that, when I was in college, I had internships at investment banks, which sounded cool at the time, but very much no room to like experiment and try things out and fail and things like that. I thought I was cool walking into a big building in a suit when I was 20 years old, but very different experiences. And I feel like I should have probably taken a summer where I just kind of tried something like that out, kind of build my own business. Even with a franchise thing, but something good to think about for students right now, right? Even law students, I think, who might be listening or what have you, there's still opportunity to kind of learn to do something on your own, even with limited hours, just to get that, even if it fails, but to your point, just to have the experience of leading somebody, of taking ownership over decisions, to having accountability for if something goes wrong. Really incredible experiences that if you do them at a really in a low risk environment where, okay, fine, someone's windows weren't clean, but it's not like a case that's gonna, ruin someone's life.
And the other piece too is as a college student, you're always looking for opportunities to bolster your resume, find ways to add value to others in a meaningful way, and be able to then point to them and say, hey, I'm worthy of this job that now I'm trying to apply for, and I have the skills necessary, not just as a person, but I have a documented series of successes that I can point to and say, hey, here's where I succeeded at that skill. I just, for me, it was the right move.
I love it. Well, so then when your kids are growing up, put them in those lemonade, get them selling pop right away. So you graduated college, right? And then you started really at Thomson Reuters basically right away, right?
So I finished out that last season. Again, those two businesses, right, painting and window cleaning, they're very seasonal, especially in Minnesota, where the second the snow flies, I mean, good luck. You want to get on a ladder when it's ice on the ground, so finished out that season. And then from there on, I've been at Thomson Reuters ever since.
And what was that first? Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you got the job, or why, or kind of what made you, join the organization in the beginning?
So Thomson Reuters is a pretty well, at least in the Minnesota market, it's a large employer in the state, and so plenty of people have a connection there. Somebody they know works in that office. There's a couple of Fortune 500 companies that are also based here, quite a few actually. But for me, it was a very reputable company. I didn't have aspirations to be a lawyer myself, but I really liked the law in theory, right? Like I liked Law and Order, and I liked these different just silly things, right? But for me, that was cool. I gravitated towards it, and so applying at Thomson Reuters was kind of at first not where I saw myself long term. It was, I think this is cool. Let me try this out. Let me prove to myself I can do it. And so I applied and ended up interviewing several rounds of interviews and got a very entry level position. Great job for a college student. And what I was doing at the time was calling law firms and asking them if they wanted new print subscriptions and updates to their Black's Law Dictionary or other different publications that were sitting as furniture on the attorney's desk behind them.
Right. And how did that go? I mean, I guess so it's basically, it was like a outbound sales, like you came in, you got on the phone and started building relationships and calling attorneys. And was it nationwide? I mean, were you calling attorneys around the country, or was it kind of regional?
I had a series of different territories that I would be working with attorneys. I started mostly in the corporate space. So I was working with corporations that had a legal department. So if it was a tax professional, right, it would be talking to them about tax publications. And so the cool part about the job was I got to learn a lot about the law. Again, not the intricacies, the inner workings, but conceptually, right? I got to get my hands into a lot of spaces that I knew nothing about. I mean, absolutely nothing about. And you have that conversation 25, 30, 40 times, you start picking up little pieces here or there. And I loved it. I mean, it was repetitive in the sense of making calls and emails and doing the daily tasks, right? But ultimately where I really enjoyed being able to have conversations with people who are doing way cooler things than I was, and having that, whether it was legal publications, whether it was Westlaw, whether it was any of these different services, products, being able to talk to people who are doing really cool things and learn about them and figure out how I could help them to do that thing better. And for me, that's always been where I thrive. Is I ask a couple of questions, I uncover what it is somebody is trying to accomplish, talk to them about the vision they have for their business, and figure out how we can problem solve that together, whether it's a paid strategy, or if it's, hey, here's 3 things that I would change immediately on. You gave me a couple of tips on my LinkedIn. Here's 3 things that I would do differently, and see how that goes and let me know. Those iterative conversations over time are really exciting for me, at least.
So I know you also sort of kind of not jumped around, but you moved up, right? And it sounds like, I mean, I think as I was at least looking at your LinkedIn, you were part of the FindLaw organization, which I think you are in now, as far as I understand. Abogado.com is part of that, which is sort of the marketing side of things. But then there was also, like you said, there's also like the legal tech, like the SaaS, Thomson Reuters SaaS part of things. So I'm curious, before we get into sort of how you got into Abogado.com and how that organization even became part of Thomson Reuters, for you, were you thinking about what within the legal space you want to focus on? Or was it kind of like growth opportunities and learning what was different and really getting a better understanding of of kind of the business of law, which in part is technology, in part is marketing? And for me, this show kind of covers both, right? I think there's a lot of information out there about the technical legal aspects of immigration law and other legal sectors, but not all that much about sort of how do you run a firm? How do you market your firm? what are the different technologies out there? So I'm just curious for you, within a huge organization, one of the perks is that you can learn a lot by moving around. So I'm just curious, sort of, were you thinking about that, or was it kind of like opportunities came up and you just said, sure, I'll try it out?
Yeah, for me, it's always been what resonates in the job with who I am as a person, right? And so for me, it was at the start, it was the print publications. I really didn't know anything about any aspect of the law, but that got me kind of grounded in, okay, here are the different practice areas, here are the different types of law, here are the different entities, right? Whether it's a small law firm, a government entity, a corporate entity, learning those details as a freshly minted college graduate. I knew none of this stuff. Shortly thereafter, I was just eating up that information and got into, after a year or so, maybe 2 years, into some of our technology, right? So some of like our Westlaw solutions, plenty of automated form documents. I'm trying to think back on just exactly all of the different SaaS products that we would communicate with attorneys about. But for me, where I kind of found my home, and I actually left this home and returned to it because I liked it so much, was in FindLaw. FindLaw is effectively, and I'm sure many of your audience members already know about this part of Thomson Reuters, but it's effectively the digital marketing arm and helping attorneys to grow their practice. What is it that you want to accomplish over the next 5 years? And let's build that business. Let's set that in intentionality, that vision, and look towards how we can accomplish that in a digital world and work backwards from there. Sure. Are there transactional items? Yeah. We want to get, this in this metro, we want to show up this way. In this metro, we want to show up this way. But the conversations that I really loved and what brought me back to FindLaw was having those vision conversations with small business owners, right? Attorneys. And ultimately, that's why I went back and got my MBA, not my JD. One, because I probably couldn't get into law school. I'm not that great of a student. But also, I liked having my hands in those different businesses, talking to business owners about how they're, what changes they made this past year that drastically transformed their business from a solo shop into a 11 attorney firm, or, every story is a little bit different, but that is what really excited me and brought me back to FindLaw. And then on the Abogado side of the house, that was really where it was kind of one of those things where you get tapped on the shoulder and you don't know exactly what it is you're signing up for, but it's going to be good. And I was a member of the team that I am now tasked with leading. And I couldn't have written the story any better personally. I minored in Spanish in college. By no means am I a native Spanish speaker, and had the ability to kind of mesh those two worlds. And so I knew the digital marketing conversation. I knew the business development conversation. I knew the value of living abroad for a minute in Spain and coming back and kind of tying all of these pieces of my story together and having an opportunity to then leverage all of those skills in a career trajectory just was, it was a dream come true. And so now I'm grappling with all of the intricacies of how do we grow, how do we scale, how do we achieve the goals that we have for ourselves and the business has for us, and deliver against those objectives.
That's amazing. You really, especially I feel like nowadays, you just don't hear about that happening too often, right? And especially in large organizations. And I keep coming back to that because I have so many friends who work in corporate environments, and it's really, really cool and refreshing to hear that, like, not only have you enjoyed it, you've actually found basically this path that is perfect for you. I'm curious because, I definitely, because I want to talk about how Abogado.com works and sort of what your goals are for it. But I'm curious, how did it get rolled into Thomson Reuters? Like, what's the history of the organization? Because it's kind of like a little mini arm within the broader FindLaw organization, right? So I don't know, can you talk a little bit about the history of how Abogado.com found its way into Thomson Reuters?
Yeah, absolutely. So several years ago, and please don't ask me exactly how many, I should know, but it's escaping me in this moment. At least 5. Law Info was its own company, and it was a legal directory, much like FindLaw, Super Lawyers. They had websites, they have a variety of services that they offered. Thomson Reuters viewed that business and understood that there was some value there, and decided to acquire that business. And with that transaction, they also had this fledgling directory underneath it, which was Abogado.com, which both of which at the moment are on pretty incredible growth trajectories. And now that they've been integrated into the Thomson Reuters and FindLaw family. And a lot of that has to do with just the secret sauce from an SEO perspective on the back end that we can geek out about later. I don't know if your audience would be super excited about.
Yeah.
But in that process of bringing that on board, we've been able to over time grow the traffic organically, grow the functionality, the benefits that law firms get for actually being a partner with us in that growth and becoming a part of our story and helping ultimately Spanish language legal consumers navigate the intricacies of that world. I can only imagine if I moved to Germany and I didn't speak German, how would I find a lawyer? How would I would Google in my native language, how do I find like you would just do it. That's exactly the path. And so that's ultimately the problem that we're solving, is helping that Spanish language legal consumer find an attorney that is going to meaningfully help them along their immigration journey, their criminal law journey, their personal injury journey, whatever that case, family law journey, whatever that case may be. Ultimately, we're helping that consumer get to someone who can help their legal need, but also their linguistic need.
And so when you joined the team, when you joined the Abogado.com team within Thomson Reuters, was it, because it sounds like you're on a growth trajectory, which is really exciting. So that means that at the time you joined, it was much smaller, and it was like, how did that happen? Because, there must have been there has to have been some idea or some kind of almost pitch, right? To say like, look, you personally are an individual who are clearly doing well at the company. You're helping a lot of clients, et cetera. There's probably other opportunities for you to really kind of shine within the organization. Why go here? Like, what was the pitch for like, hey, here's this part of the business that's, I suppose it sounds like, was relatively small at the time. Let's not keep it, let's grow it. Like, let's put the gas, step on the gas. So I don't know, what was your pitch for that? Because now, yeah, hindsight's 2020. It sounds great. It makes a lot of sense. But like at the time, that's what I'm curious about here, because to me, this is the parallel of when you start a business early on. How do you pitch it to new clients? How do you pitch it to investors? How do you sort of convince people that there's inherent value here and that there should be resources put into it? So I'm curious, sort of, how did you navigate that, or how did that happen for you?
So I'm kind of a weird numbers person, like not calculus, I'm talking bar napkin math. I mean, like X's and O's on a piece of paper, like it's very simple tasks. But for me, I track a lot of metrics, and that in that exercise, in knowing the metrics of my business at the time, and knowing, just applying them to another part of the business, and having kind of this mix of experience where I really, really liked the FindLaw world. I liked helping small business owners, attorneys grow their practices, and seeing that this was kind of an untapped market, not in the sense that there wasn't legal need in the marketplace, but there wasn't someone leading this charge. There wasn't somebody out there, and by no means am I saying nobody was selling this product before I or my team came into this. There was tons of people who are instrumental to the growth of Abogado and all of the behind the scenes, people who are making the SEO work, people who are making, the content and constantly creating new ways for us to be more valuable to our customers. All of that is happening, and there are kind of an unmet demand in the marketplace. And doing that bar napkin math, for me, it was kind of one of those aha moments, just going, again, I don't know exactly what I have here, but there's something here. And I'm sure with Laborless, like, I'm guessing you kind of had that aha moment too, just whenever it was for you. For me, it was, I'm doing well as I was selling into corporations at the time, selling kind of Westlaw and Practical Law and all of these attorney tools to practice the law. And I wasn't getting super excited, for me personally. There are tons of people who wake up every morning and are ecstatic about those tools. I wasn't one of them. And for whatever reason, this spoke to me in a really meaningful way. And from that moment, it opened up doors that I couldn't script it. If I had written this story, I wouldn't have gotten to this. I don't know if I would have even gotten to this point. It's been a blessing, and I'm excited every day to lead this charge.
That's amazing. It's cool that you, number one, recognize that, and then of course number two, that it happened. I want to take a quick pause here just to kind of give a few people some shout outs. So George says, great show. Marianne says, love the Minneapolis airport, so much natural light. I don't know if that's a joke or not, because I do see a winky face at the end, but I love airport. I miss airports so much. Anita Lopez says Damian Wilson leads by example, which is really nice.
Thank you, Anita.
Neil Alvarado says Spanish the second most spoken language in the U.S. Totally. It's funny. I'm in New York City. I spent many years in middle school and high school learning Spanish. I took Spanish in college. I took a Spanish class in law school, and like I'm decent. I'm conversational, but really not as good as I should be given the amount of years I spent learning it. It's really hard if you don't practice it on a daily basis and talk to someone. It's just tough.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that's the other cool thing is I've been able to, the team that I get to work with every day, it is many of them, all of them for the most part are bilingual. Some of them are native Spanish speakers. I mean, it is just a cool environment to be in. And we're bringing that energy, that conversation to law firms across the country and helping them to get excited about it too. And so to Neil's point about it being the second most spoken language in the US, I think another part of this market it's easy to miss if you're not looking for it. The US is the second largest Spanish speaking market, period. End of sentence, behind Mexico. And so like that's a crazy statistic too, that I personally didn't until coming on this journey, I didn't necessarily know that. And so there's a variety of really cool analytics that speak to the need that's out there, and being able to help lawyers tap into this market and better serve their customers is exciting, and why I do the job.
We have one more question here that I think is a really interesting one. So Marcos kind of asks, what's the biggest difference between an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur? And what's the one thing that entrepreneurs can learn from intrapreneurs? Because I think often you do see it the opposite way. Intrapreneurs, learn from entrepreneurs because maybe they have less boundaries or what have you. But what do you think could be the other way around, that people who are starting their own business from scratch can learn from someone in your position who's growing a business within a large organization?
Man, that's a loaded question. there's just a lot to unpack. Let me speak to just where I see value as an intrapreneur. I really like that I have some guardrails for someone who has kind of isn't able to provide the structure for themselves. An intrapreneur kind of can come in and place themselves within an organization, within those guardrails, and thrive. And an entrepreneur tends to be able to create out of nothing. And it's not that one is better than the other. I think that there's just inherent differences in both roles, and a person is going to find themselves either in one category or the other. I learn things from entrepreneurs every day. And I even just your session, your immigration conference, I pulled so much value out of that conference. It was unbelievable. Just learning from different minds on digital marketing and how people are carving their own paths. I mean, that was the cool thing about that conference is every single person, every speaker there truly had their own lane, separate lane, right? And so they were able to kind of carve out a meaningful path within the digital marketing space for their immigration message, and be able to then, or personal injury message, and be able to speak to it and share their story and their journey with everyone. And so I learned a lot from you and the conference that you put on. And then in terms of intrapreneurs and what we bring to the table, I'll put myself in that category. I think there's a lot that I think corporate America kind of gets a bad rap sometimes, in terms of just that, you got to show up at 9, you got to work till 5, and then you got to, put in your expense reports and do all the check all the boxes, right? And although some of that, there's inherent truth to that, I think there's also an opportunity for growth and scale, and be able to scratch that entrepreneurial itch within a safe environment, and be able to thrive in that space too. And so for me, it worked on all levels. And now that I've got 2 boys, Alex and Henry, they are for example, I just got off of a paternity leave not so long ago, a benefit that Thomson Reuters employees get, where you get a significant amount of paid time off, right? Those are things that an entrepreneur may or may not be able to leverage themselves and be able to spend that precious time with their family. So I think both have incredible benefits. It just depends on where you see yourself in that equation.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. You're right. It does get a bad rap. I think it does. And I think it's changing because there are a lot more opportunities, like you've mentioned, but that's a really great point. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask, because we've talked a lot about kind of how you got there and your vision. Can you talk a little bit about how Abogado.com works? Because I think we haven't really dove into that. And so what does it do? How does it work? And I know you don't just focus on immigration lawyers, but of course, because you focus on the Spanish-speaking sort of legal community, immigration is a large, pretty probably sizable chunk of that. How does Abogado.com work, and sort of how do lawyers out there, how can they benefit from it? What does it do?
Yeah, so it is a online platform, and if it serves different purposes for different users. The law firm themselves can be the destination for the Spanish language legal consumer. Okay, so if I do it, let's look at it from the lens of the legal consumer. If they're out there and they're in their cell phone, right, they're pulling up Google and doing Abogado de Inmigración in Phoenix or in New York, or Abogado de Visa in Sacramento, whatever the search ultimately is on the mobile device. When that search comes in, and there's no guarantees with Google, but we've done an incredible job, and I take no credit for that, because there's a massive team of people making sure that the SEO is on point, and that our search results, or our directory, populates within search results, but it shows up pretty highly organically in Google. And so then when that consumer chooses that path, they choose to click on the that search result. It takes them into a list of attorneys that, one, are a firm that's identified that they want to take Spanish-speaking business, but also for that practice area. So whether it's personal injury, family law, divorce, you do that search, Abogado de Divorcio in Boston, right? Like any search in Spanish, typically speaking, will populate our directory. And so the consumer then can go in and answer whatever question that they have, or communicate with the law firm and retain their services. So there's also other elements of Abogado.com that are really powerful. There's a lot of free information on Abogado.com for the end user as well. So if you need information about an immigration matter, for example, the platform does not necessarily answer the question. It gives you enough information to engage a lawyer and find, hey, oh, this is the matter that I have. This is the issue that I'm having. I got to talk to Roman about that issue, right? And so that's the purpose of the platform, is to be the connective tissue between the law firm and the Spanish language legal consumer.
And so for the lawyers, do they create a profile? Do they fill out some sort of information? Like, how does it look? And I mean, is it paid? Like, do they have to pay to be on it? Like, I don't know. How does it work?
Yeah, so it is a paid platform. That is part of, the purpose is to connect and create value for the two people. So you would engage a member of my team, or you can message me after the show if you have questions and are interested. But you go in and speak with that individual, and then you're presented with a series of options. So maybe you're a law firm that does a series of practice areas, and you would want coverage in those areas. And maybe you have a regional aspect to your practice. You want to be in these particular counties. Or now with immigration being virtual almost in its entirety across the US, a lot of attorneys are looking at it differently, right? They're choosing to have more of a national or regional presence for their practice, because ultimately, if we're going to be conducting business this way, the brick and mortar location doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
And so that's the part where we can, have that vision conversation. Where is it that you see yourself being in 5 years or in 2 years, or what growth goals do you have over the next 6 months, and work backwards and figure out what it means then. How many impressions, how many clicks, how many shares, how much engagement in social media or on website content, or on, how is the SEO of your website? Are you doing blog posts? Do you have social, do you have campaigns set up that are going to get you there? And if you don't, let's talk about those components that other law firms are deploying and show you the measurable ways that you can get there. That's the part that I really gravitate towards and love having those conversations.
It's like a consultative conversation. I mean, part of it is, you get the platform, but the other thing is, like, let's dive into the way you're running your business now, what your goals are, and how we can build a bridge towards those goals, right? Using XYZ. And I'm assuming then you help them with, like, fill the gaps of what they need.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not something that we even offer. I mean, sometimes we're just being the connective tissue to another vendor or another, we uncover that the problem is in a particular part of their intake, that they don't have a ability to track that case all the way through. Well, maybe we need to connect them to a different part of Thomson Reuters or a different vendor, and be the introduction there to help them facilitate that. Sometimes it's attorneys don't take particular cases, and they want to know another firm that they can refer those cases to. And we happen to know a lot of law firms and be able to refer those cases different directly. So there are an absolute bounty of ways that we work with firms in that space, and it's more about learning what's going on at the firm today, and where do they want to be, and what's holding them back, and then taking it from there and building a business development plan to get them to that destination.
Yeah, that's super fun. I love that approach too. I love that kind of discussion. I was hoping to, maybe nerd out for a few minutes on this, because you did mention SEO before. Do you have any? Because we're talking, you're basically an expert on this and your team. Do you have any sort of things that you see a lot of firms doing that you can just say, look, there's a high likelihood that most law firms out there are not doing XYZ or should be doing ABC? I mean, do you have any sort of like really kind of high level tips that you can share? Usually I don't ask people to kind of just share tips, but I think this is what you do. Like, you help support law firms in their growth. For example, I can give you the top 2 or 3 things I know immigration lawyers don't do on LinkedIn that they can certainly do to increase their engagement and make their profiles better. I'm curious what maybe some of those things are for you, or from what you see.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing to remember, especially in my space, is that we're talking about a Spanish language legal consumer. Grounding the conversation there, I think, is important, because ultimately a lot of law firms are viewing their website, their LinkedIn pages, as their kind of public business card, right? If you will. This is who I am, and this is what I'm about. Well, a lot of times we forget about this third player, in the market between the consumer and the law firm, and it's Google. The language isn't necessarily Spanish that Google cares about. It's the code of the website. It's things, a variety of things that can make or break your ability to break into those top results. And so to simplify it, I think there's a series of very simple steps that law firms can implement that are seemingly trivial and not trivial at all. If you're not going to have any Spanish language content on your site, it's going to be really hard for you to show up organically in search results. So, as silly as that sounds, adding some sort of Spanish language content to your website in highly competitive markets like Manhattan, there's lots of law firms with an abundance of content and high quality content as well. In different parts of the country, that may or may not be the case. And so having a little bit of content, and do a Spanish language search, see who's showing up there. Poke around on their website and see what they're doing. Are they blogging in Spanish? Do they have Spanish language reviews? None of these things necessarily cost money. You can be doing these as an attorney. If you choose, it does cost money. And what I'll say is, it just costs money in a different way, right? Your time. If you're writing blog posts, you are not necessarily practicing the law, right? And so you're instead of charging for your services, so with that being said, if you have Spanish content on the site, and you want to attract more Spanish business, I think the other thing to open up is your referral networks. So a lot of times other firms want to send you business, but they don't know you take Spanish cases, right? And so having every location that you exist on the web, having some reference to Spanish, if you have the ability to take Spanish speaking business, make sure you're doing that. Take that opportunity. Things like LinkedIn. Not very many firms actually say that they take Spanish on their LinkedIn page itself. Attorneys often don't check the box that they speak Spanish on their language section of LinkedIn. Like, these are little things. State bar websites, for example. If you don't have that box checked, and some attorney, right, it's not going to be an end user. It'll be an attorney looking in the state bar website. They're going to do a search potentially for law firms, criminal law firms, if you're not familiar with the area, criminal law firms in Miami that take Spanish. And then there's going to be 5 names. I'm going to choose from one of the names, and I'm just going to send the lead there. If you're not there on that list, you can't get that lead. And so there's other platforms, our platforms, as well as, competing online directories. There are an abundance of places for free, no more than you are spending today, that you can be promoting the fact that you speak Spanish or have Spanish speaking staff, or that you want Spanish speaking business, and that you're taking active steps in your business to do so. If that means you're bringing in a translator and are then able to work that case, fantastic. Just be open, be honest, say who you are and what it is you're about. You want Spanish speaking business, and do so any place that you can meaningfully on the web. And that gives you a significant leg up because most firms aren't taking that step.
It's funny because it's you're right. It's so simple. I mean, you just say the thing that you want. That's all you got to do. At the very least, just say we take Spanish speaking clients, and that in and of itself can be such a powerful move because you're not making people assume, you're not giving them the opportunity to assume, you're actually filling in that information gap and saying, no, we do take these types of cases.
Yeah, Hablamos Español on the top right corner of your website with a phone number specific to a line that's going to be answered by a Spanish speaker or a service. I mean, there's plenty of phone answering services. We offer one that actually answers the phones in Spanish. Like there's so many different ways that you can open yourself up to that customer if you just raise your hand. And many law firms are way hyper aware of that and on that track. And there's other firms that are interested and just haven't put two and two together. And so we're kind of working with both ends of that spectrum and figuring out how we can play a role in connecting the law firm with that Spanish language consumer.
So we got it. Marianne here says very valid point regarding Spanish language content, which it is really interesting. I mean, if you have blogs, but even if not blogs, it's just even one about page that's in all Spanish would be great. And I think too, Jared's probably thinking what other people are thinking, saying that this is some golden advice. So thank you. I know we have about 3 more minutes. I wanted to ask you one more question, and that is, what do you see for the future of Abogado.com? I mean, you're in it. You're saying there's a growth trajectory. Can you give us a little bit of insight? Whatever you can share about what does that some of that growth mean? Is it more clients? Is it more services? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say even in the time that I've been here, the breadth of services has deepened significantly. I mean, when I started, it was we'd add you to the directory. You'd be a name on a list. You'd have a phone number. You'd have a basic profile, and people would call you. That was kind of the service at the time. Since then, we've added the ability to get reviews on that platform, add photos, add links out to social media, connect in Spanish contents pages of your website. So if you don't have those, we can even create those for a firm and have Spanish language content. We can do their website if they want a bilingual approach to outsourcing their website business to us. Spanish language PPC, Spanish language social media. So in the small time that I have been a part of the Abogado story, there has been an incredible, and I take no credit for its incredible growth from a product service standpoint and what we offer. And where I've found incredible value is in the customer conversations and being able to work with small business owners on how they can leverage those platforms to achieve the goals that they have. And if I had to put a bet down on the table, I would say that the small law firm customers who really, one attorney solo shops, one attorney firms, all the way up to 50, 100 attorney firms, they're going to take on more and more Spanish speaking business as they realize the opportunity that's in front of them. And so just excited to play some role in that equation and continue on this journey.
I love it. Super exciting. And you know what? As a lot of immigration reform is coming down the pike in terms of normalizing people's status. I mean, Venezuelan TPS, there's DACA, right? I mean, there's so much out there where more and more Spanish speakers are going to look for, illegal services. I think that this is, it's a brilliant move. I like to end these shows on sort of more of a fun, I suppose, question. You've basically spent your whole career right now, at this point at Thomson Reuters in one way or shape or form. But you started off, there you go, the water bottle, Thomson Reuters water bottle. But you started off building a scaling, summertime sort of window cleaning kind of business when you're in college, or well, first you were parking cars, scaling, that, which is of course funny, but like true, and certainly in a pretty meaningful way. If for some reason, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, so if Thomson Reuters corporate is watching, Damian's not going anywhere. But if you were like, I'm retiring tomorrow, I'm going to start my own business. Do you have like that dream business that you've always thought, you know what, if I had, sometime down the line, sometime in the future, I want to do this?
Oh, that's an exciting question. I don't have a good answer for you, Roman. I think that I do see myself as being an entrepreneur and starting my own business, but I think it'd be much more along the lines of career adjacent, something that I can do in my off time as a hobby and enjoy the fruits of my labor thus far in my career. And so the short-term answer is absolutely not. I am so excited about the space that I'm in. And long-term, who knows? But as an entrepreneur yourself, as an intrapreneur myself, I will permanently have that itch to create. It's in my DNA. And so that will be with me forever. Where that takes me, I don't know.
Fair. Love it. Well, Damian, thank you so much. I know you're a busy man and you've got to run, so really appreciate your time and your insights. Not just about the story, but also about quite literally what people listening can do to up their game in terms of, kind of their law firm marketing, particularly for Spanish speaking audiences. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Roman.
Really awesome. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate your comments. Appreciate your insights and your questions here. Super interesting. Definitely reach out to Damian on LinkedIn, Damian Wilson. And of course, check out abogado.com and, see what they have to offer. I think, the digital marketing side of immigration is just growing at an exponential rate, and organizations like Abogado.com are providing really cool services. So I'm always excited to share what other people are doing, and I'm always excited to support law firms as well. So, thank you again for being here and supporting the show. We'll be back next week with another episode. And in the meantime, have a wonderful weekend and peace out. Stay safe.